Overnight, Iran fired multiple waves of missiles into Israel. In its first direct bombardment since the truce. This leaves the ceasefire that has held barely since April in serious danger of collapse. It followed an Israeli airstrike on Beirut's southern suburbs that killed 2 people and wounded 20, just days after Lebanon and Israel had renewed their ceasefire in Washington. Israel said it was hitting Hezbollah command centers. Iran said it acted in defense, calling its strikes a warning against further Israeli aggression in Lebanon. US President Donald Trump has weighed in. This morning he demanded both sides immediately stop shooting, but Israel struck Tehran after Trump had publicly urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to retaliate. That gap between what Washington asks and what Israel does has been the story of the past 2 weeks. Trump called Netanyahu fucking crazy on the phone last week, telling him, "You'd be in prison if it weren't for me." It came amid Israel's escalations in Lebanon, which continuously threatened to blow up US negotiations with Tehran. Netanyahu has played down the call, calling it a tactical disagreement between friends. But is this the straw that breaks the camel's back? And if Netanyahu risks it all, can Israel take Iran without US support? I'm joined now by Israeli diplomat and writer Alon Pinkas. Alon, welcome to MEE Live. Netanyahu struck Iran overnight despite a direct request from Trump. Is this a man who has calculated that he can defy his most important ally, or has he lost control of events?
He's obviously lost control of events, Matilda, because he's frustrated that the war did not proceed and result the way he had wanted. But I think this defies, by the way, this is the third instance in the last 10 days in which he defies Trump. First, Trump announced ceremoniously that there would be a ceasefire in Lebanon, and Israel did not abide by that. Then Trump implored Netanyahu not to attack Beirut and was defied by Netanyahu. And thirdly, last night, Mr. Trump had asked Netanyahu to restrain himself and postpone or at least hold off on any retaliation against Iran. And again, Israel defied, or Netanyahu rather, defied Trump. But I think this has to do with a domestic political calculus on the part of Netanyahu. He probably assumed this would last no more than a day, 2 days, or 3 days, and by all signs, that may be the case. And he has a political audience that he needs to satisfy, to show, to brag, to boast that he had said no to the president of the U.S. When Israeli national security was on the line, et cetera, et cetera. He's appealing to his base ahead of an election. So I think it was a calculated risk in the sense that, okay, this act of defiance will not go further. However, going back to your initial point, Matilda, he did lose control. He did lose control of events in the sense that he no longer calls the shots, and I'm quoting from Mr. Trump's post and on his social media network, Truth Social. Netanyahu cannot go at it alone. He needs the U.S., and he understands that there's a divergence between Israel and the U.S. right now.
Right, because Iran will have done its own calculations as well. It reportedly possesses more missiles than Israel has interceptors to prevent. So theoretically, you think Israel could not take Iran without US support?
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, depends how you define, Matilda, take Iran. If this is a prolonged kinetic ping pong, of Israeli aerial attacks and Iranian missile or drone retaliations and vice versa, then theoretically, hypothetically rather, this could go on for a few weeks, but that won't change anything. That will not affect the fundamentals of the conflict. That would not bring about any major changes in Iran, and that would not, precipitate any kind of decisive military victory. On top of which, you're absolutely right in terms of weapons or munitions, rather, depletion. that Israel is going to run out of interceptors. And what Trump basically said yesterday, both yesterday and today, is that you're at it alone. This is no longer my war. I've helped you all I can. I've been cooperating with you to the extent that I deemed necessary. But as of now, you're on your own. And in that respect, Israel can't go at it alone.
Okay, so I'm curious then, why does it seem that certain opposition figures in Israel are not making the same calculations you're doing, are not discerning that Israel can't do this without US and continually pushing Netanyahu to push the barriers of that friendship? Because it seems that Netanyahu is prioritizing his political survival and his hardline coalition over the relationship with Washington. But if that is a dangerous direction to take Israel in, why are they doing that?
That's a very good question, and I wish, Matilda, I knew the answer to that, because I'm tempted to say because they're spineless. All these opposition leaders, they're trying to go around Netanyahu and attack him from the right, meaning you should be more forceful, you should attack more, you should do this without. Instead of questioning the very premise of the war, the very premise of this particular conflagration in the last 24 hours. And instead, you're absolutely right. They're basically adopting his narrative. And rather than challenging the premises of what he's saying, they are fortifying what he's saying and blaming him for not going far enough. I think that in general, their attitude towards this is nothing short of pathetic.
And now the question is, how far has Netanyahu pushed that relationship with Trump? We know that Trump called him fucking crazy on a phone call, but he since sort of insisted it wasn't, the relationship solid. I guess over the course of this war, how has that relationship, how has that friendship actually changed, if at all, from where we sit today?
When someone calls you crazy, when someone calls you a fucking lunatic, and you say, well, he meant it in a nice way, it's okay that no one's going to take you seriously. And I think no one is taking Netanyahu seriously on this. Certainly not Donald Trump. Trump was expressing not just a specific discontent or disillusionment with Netanyahu when he said that, but it wasn't in regards to an attack in Lebanon. But he said that as an expression of his entire disillusionment with the war. Trump was convinced, I don't want to say duped or swindled or manipulated, although those are very relevant terms here. But let's be nice and call it, Trump was persuaded by Netanyahu to enter this war based on several premises. That it would be short, it was not. That the regime will collapse, it did not. That there would be a popular uprising in Iran, there was none. That Iran would never dare attack the Arab Gulf countries, it did. And that Iran is incapable of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, it was. And Trump got in trouble politically. The war is extraordinarily unpopular in the U.S., including amongst Republicans, specifically amongst his supporters, the MAGA, the Make America Great Again, cult-like electorate. The U.S. has been isolated in the world. Gasoline prices have gone up. No one in Europe is willing to help Trump in this. The Chinese are laughing at him. It affected negatively his trip to China 2 weeks ago. So he vented all this against Netanyahu. How much damage did that cause the relationship? Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, the Israeli-American relationship has had structural cracks in it for some time now, many of which have been not caused by, accelerated by Mr. Netanyahu himself. It remains to be seen after the election if Mr. Netanyahu is going to remain the prime minister. If he does, we can go and relitigate and revisit this question. How much damage did it cause? Is it causing long-term damage? Absolutely. You look at the polls in the U.S. on perceptions and opinions about Israel, and you see a downward spiraling graph of more and more and more people in America, particularly the young. By young, I mean 40, 45 and under, who have a negative opinion of Israel.
I guess, though, by this point, the US has invested decades in the strategy in the Middle East of Israeli dominance. So if Israel is really determined to resume and pursue this war with Iran, has the US simply invested too much to walk away now?
Well, look, the U.S. supposedly invested because of its own interests, but I've seen in the last 20 years a trend of a U.S. disengagement from the Middle East. Yes, the U.S. went into the war with Iran twice, in June 2025 and again in February 2026. But in the overall geopolitical sense, the U.S. is disengaging from the Middle East and focusing more on East Asia. On China, on the Korean Peninsula, on Taiwan, obviously, and the South China Sea. That is in terms of U.S. Declared foreign policy. In terms of specifically the Trump administration, you see a complete abdication of alliances. Trump is questioning relations with South Korea, relations with Japan, relations with the Philippines. He is belittling and dismissing and deriding NATO. And so after this period of time, even the Arab Gulf states are looking at the U.S. and revisiting their positions. Is it worth our while? Is the U.S. credible? Is the U.S. dependable? Which brings us to last but not least, or least but not last, to Israel. The U.S. has no, well-defined, coherent, and core interests in this relationship with Israel. It remains an ally, yes. It remains a country with which the U.S. cooperates on an array of intelligence information and counterterrorism efforts, yes. But in terms of the investment that you rightly alluded to, I think the U.S. is going to bring that down and tone it down significantly in the next 5-6 years.
Mm. So then I guess the question is, with the ball now in Trump's court, with him having explicitly asked Israel not to retaliate and Israel having done so, what does Trump do? If Israel's defiance carries no real consequences, I think it could be argued that, this feeds into the Iranian fear that any deal with Washington is worthless because Washington can't control its own ally. Is that on Trump's mind? Is he aware that he may need to signal that actually he can keep Israel under the reins?
I don't know what's on Trump's mind. I don't think anyone knows what's on Trump's mind. And I know I'm stating the obvious. And I don't think that anyone who's trying to understand Trump and subject him to some rational, logical, political analysis is going to get anywhere, because he contradicts himself 4 times a day and 14 times a week. All that being said and established, Trump made it clear that this is no longer his war. Trump made it clear that he wants an agreement with Iran. Trump also made it clear that it's none of Israel's business what kind of deal that's going to be. Ergo, his appeal that his statement, not appeal rather, that I call the shots, not Netanyahu. Israel will have to accept this, which basically is the answer to your question. I'm not in this war anymore. This is no longer my issue. And if you are not with me, then by definition, I don't care about you. And so I think in that respect, he does hold the cards, as he likes to say. But then again, there's no agreement with Iran yet. I mean, we may be talking a week from now somewhat differently, because the Iranians have the Iranians have rejected an American deal, or the Americans rejected the Iranian proposal, and before you know it, there could be a flare-up between the U.S. and Iran. Not likely, but could happen. So I really don't know in that respect. Now, you did reference or allude to something very important here, and that is the perception that Israel is such a client state and a subservient ally that the U.S. can rein in Israel whenever it wants. And here goes Mr. Netanyahu and defies Trump 3 times in 10 days. And what does that say? And in that respect, I'm sure that you're right. And through Trump's mind, the one that I have no claims of understanding, I'm sure that Trump is aware of that he was made to look foolish. Now, he may let this one slip, as goes the saying. He may look the other way and assume that, all right, so the Israelis vented their anger, the Iranians vented their anger. I have a mission here, and that is to conclude a deal with Iran, and I couldn't care less about what the Israelis do. But in terms of how everyone else sees it, Trump looks weak. And by the way, Israel looks weak. Trump looks weak because he cannot reign in Israel. Israel looks weak because if that is the case, then it no longer enjoys this superpower mentorship and protective umbrella that it had from the U.S.
That definitely would change the game. Alon Pinkas, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Matilda. Always good to be with you.
Likewise.